Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. What are we getting into today, Trace?
Well, today's story is going to take us way up north to Iron River in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So, let's get into it. This is Season 3, Episode 11, Chris Regan. In today's episode, we will be talking about an incredibly twisted, bizarre, and horrific story that involved a love triangle and a blood pact. This is a story about a man named Christopher Carl Regan. He was 53 years old, divorced father of 2 adult sons, and a United States Air Force veteran. He was a responsible, hardworking man that possessed top-notch leadership skills. Chris and Terry O'Donnell had met in the 1980s as friends, and decades later they would reunite through Facebook and decided that they would pursue a relationship. Chris moved to Iron River in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to be with Terry and give this relationship all he could. Chris landed a job in a local factory in Iron River called the Oldenburg Group. They make a variety of products they sell to the Navy, including refueling systems, deck equipment, cranes, and boat davits. Their equipment is on almost every ship in the fleet, and soon Chris was put in a leadership position there as he made a great impression as a leader. Chris and Terry were very serious about one another, and Terry said she wanted to spend the rest of her life with Chris. However, after a year and a half, they split amicably. Terry still loved Chris but couldn't deal with his addiction to pornography. They did, however, remain close and talked on the phone every day. Chris had decided that he wanted to make a fresh start, and that included leaving the UP. Around this time, Chris had knee surgery and needed a less physical job, so he applied for a position in Asheville, North Carolina. His new position would be basically a desk job, and that sounded perfect to him. He was going to move in with one of his adult sons, whose name was also Chris Regan, but a junior, in hopes of rebuilding their relationship as they had drifted apart over the years. All that was left to do for Chris was to take and pass a drug test that was scheduled on October 15th, 2014. Terry said that passing the test wouldn't be a problem for him. Chris had talked to Terry on the phone on October 14th at 6 a.m., telling her of his upcoming drug test appointment and how excited he was for his next journey. They had planned on going out to dinner that evening for a farewell dinner and to celebrate Chris's new chapter in life. But when Terry didn't hear from Chris later that night, or the next day, or the next week, she became very worried. Chris would never not call. On October 27, 2014, Laura Frizzo, the police chief in Iron River, was sitting at her desk when she noticed a woman getting out of her vehicle in the parking lot. When the woman turned around, Frizzo could see that she was clearly upset and crying. Terry entered the building and sat down with Chief Frizzo and told her that she needed to report a missing person through her tears. She told Frizzo that Chris had been missing since October 14th, and that she had not heard from him in 2 weeks, which was extremely out of character, as they talked every day. Terry also told her that Chris's car had been parked at a nearby park and ride for 2 weeks. Chris wouldn't just leave his car. It was his baby. He loved that car. The reason she knew it was at the park and ride is because Terry had to drive by it on her way home. Chris rented an apartment from Terry's parents after their split, and officers went with Terry to Chris's apartment as she was able to get the master keys from her parents. When they walked into his apartment, it was in disarray. He had been packing and had lists of things left to do, as well as contacts to finalize his move. There was also the paperwork for his new position in North Carolina that he had not yet sent. His appointment had also been missed for his drug test on October 15th, 2014. Terry stated that Chris would never leave his apartment in such a mess, and that she felt someone had been there and rifled through his things and left the apartment in such a messy state. Next, They met at Chris's parked car at the park and ride west of Iron River. They noticed several things in the front of his vehicle, including his knee brace, which he wore all the time since his recent surgery. Terry was anxious to get in the trunk of the car, as she felt that perhaps someone had put Chris in there and that they would find him inside. But once they opened the trunk, there was no Chris. Relief, but no relief, right?
So he never made it to his son's. He had just planned to go to his son's. His car was parked at a rideshare place, not at his house. But his house was completely demolished, and he left without his knee brace. Am I following correctly?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so he probably can't walk very well without his knee brace. So it sounds like somebody came in, took him, and messed up his place. So this guy was into porn. My brain is already going to the whole, he was into porn more than she realized.
Yeah.
And it was a whole ring going on, and he stepped out of bounds. Because that's what it sounds like.
Well, he's not involved in a ring. He's just really addicted to porn. And it's something that Terry's like, yo, dude, that's not working for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's more coming.
All right.
So Iron River is located in a remote area of the Upper Peninsula. You don't have to go very far to be surrounded by deep woods which have coyotes, wolves, and bears. Chris was also known for his love of adventure and hiking, so they thought perhaps he had gone out into the woods, gotten lost, or attacked by something and just never made it back. Now, occasionally a hunter will go missing or fishermen will be reported missing, but usually that's within a few hours. Chief Rizzo decided to have Chris's car towed to the state police impound to have a forensic team search the vehicle for any clues as to who was in it. They also gained access to his phone records and bank account for any clues leading to his disappearance. They wanted to know when the last time he used his bank cards, what he purchased, and when. The last time his card was used was at an Iron River gas station at 4 o'clock on October 14th in the afternoon for gas. At 4:13, they were able to see Chris Regan pull into the gas station and fuel up from the camera at the gas station. Chief Rizzo was able to see what he was wearing, a t-shirt and jeans. Chief Rizzo realized she needed help as they were understaffed for this kind of situation. She reached out to the state police commander and said, quote, "We don't have a detective. We are understaffed. We need some help." 3 detectives reached out. They considered Terry O'Donnell, which is the girlfriend, their number one suspect. Chris and Terry had been in a relationship that didn't work out, and she lived close to the park and ride where his vehicle was found. Terry had also told Frizzo that she had known that Chris had been in contact with other women. Terry confronted Chris about it. Chris was interested in other women, and they thought that maybe Terry was the jealous type. Michigan State Police had Terry in their sights as they thought perhaps she had something to do with his disappearance because she was jealous of the other women in Chris's life. The Michigan State Police interviewed Terry at her home and talked to her for over 2 hours. In that time, they talked about how he may have been suicidal, or maybe he took off, and implied that she may have had something to do with it. She said she was actually kind of enraged by the accusation. Michigan State Police wanted to take Terry for a polygraph test, but Frizzo disagreed as she had seen her the night when she came in to file the missing persons report. She saw the way Terry's eyes looked, the way she was upset, and said that you just don't see that in someone who's trying to mask their feelings or trying to cover something up. She could see the truthfulness, the sorrow, the panic. For her, it was obvious she had not been involved. The decision put the state police and Frizzo at odds, and unfortunately, that would not be the only time. After a press release and reading some of the comments from the release, there was a comment that said, quote, "What about Dale Vassar?" Now, Dale had lived in the apartment complex that Chris resided in at one point and had done some drywall work for Chris as well. But after interviewing him and from confirming that he wasn't even in the state at the time of the disappearance, He was ruled out as a suspect. With that lead gone, Frizzo turns to Chris's employer, a military contractor called the Oldenburg Group. The human resource director, Laura Satori, remembers being asked about Chris and his whereabouts and when was the last time he reported to work. She said he was very sharp, very smart. He was immediately appointed to supervisor, and his military background and experience is what got him the promotion so quickly. They needed a leader, and he had a lot of that to share, she stated. She also stated there were several people who didn't appreciate that he got the position as they had been there longer and that he was kind of an outsider. She stated that the last day he worked was October 14th, and the next day he had a slip to be out of the office. She stated that he was supposed to return on the 16th and work for his team leader, but he didn't show up. One of his coworkers had said he was moving to North Carolina and moving in with his son, but they knew he would still have given notice. She said he wouldn't just leave like that. That's not Chris. When she received the phone call from Chief Rizzo, she said she took it kind of hard and personal. Chief Rizzo asked if there was anyone that he knew while at work, maybe someone he hung out with or knew him well, someone she could contact who may know where he was. There was rumor that he was seeing another employee, and her name was Kelly Cochran. She was a married woman. Chris and Kelly had met because their workstations were not very far away from each other. Terry stated that after their breakup, Chris had been looking for someone who could perhaps keep him company. She had never met Kelly. She didn't know what she looked like. However, she did know her name, and that was someone he had hooked up with in the summertime, and that she was someone he had worked with. Kelly was hired as an electrical assembler. She was a very hard worker, a good worker, caught on very quickly, very outgoing, but she was also a woman with problems. Kelly's team leader had come to Satori about Kelly that she had had some issues at home, so she had called Kelly into her office. Kelly told her that her husband had tried to kill her and then he was going to commit suicide. It really bothered her what Kelly had shared. She had even gone home that evening and talked with her husband about opening up the apartment adjacent to their home for Kelly as a way for her to escape. But her husband put the kibosh on that. He didn't think it was a good idea. Boy, he couldn't have been more right. Chief Rizzo was getting the flags. Was Chris having an affair with a married woman who was already having issues at home? She decided that she needed to contact Kelly and see if she knew where Chris was. Troopers went to Kelly's residence, and there they found Jason Cochran, who was asked if Kelly was his wife. He said she was, and they asked to speak with her. He was defensive, irritated, agitated, not polite at all. He stated she wasn't home, and he didn't have any idea where she was, but she would be home in about an hour. They asked if there was anyone else in the house, and he said no, there wasn't. But just at that moment, a female came out. It was Kelly Cochran. Guess she was home after all. Her demeanor was totally different than her husband's. Friendly, asking if there was anything she could do to help the officers. They asked Jason why he lied, and Kelly replied, he thought I might be in trouble. Now, why would she be in trouble? They asked Kelly if she had been in contact with Chris. She stated that it was around October 14th or 15th that she had had any contact with him. She stated that she had tried to call and text and that he hadn't answered. The officers also said his car had been at the park and ride for 2 weeks, and Kelly said she had never heard of the park and ride. They also asked if she and Chris were having an affair. She said yes. She'd been having an affair with him and that her husband was okay with it. The trooper stated that Jason Cochran stood there with no emotion, no anger, nothing, and stood stoically. They thought it was strange that Kelly was talking about a relationship with another man, but there was no reaction from Jason, her husband.
Okay, so wait a minute. They're asking to talk to her, and he's an irate idiot. And then they're talking to her in front of him about her having an affair, and he's totally stoic?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So something's fishy with these two.
Very fishy. Kelly had seemed concerned for Chris's well-being and that she was afraid he had already left for North Carolina without saying goodbye to her. And if they do hear anything from him or find anything out, to please let her know. The troopers contacted Frizzo and told her they thought something about their meeting with Kelly felt very strange and very wrong. Frizzo trusted the troopers' instincts and thought there was room for suspicion with these people. The next day, Frizzo invited Jason and Kelly to the police department for questioning. They questioned Kelly first. She told them that the last time she saw Chris, they had had dinner in his apartment. She said that they were best friends and they would have dinner every night. Sometimes she would cook and sometimes he would cook. She said that he had come over to her house maybe 2 or 3 times in the 4 months that they had been seeing one another. Kelly said that Chris really wouldn't have been someone she thought she would date. For one, the age difference. She was 33 at the time, but they became really close, and she had feelings for him and even love for him. She also claimed he asked her to move to North Carolina with him. Kelly said she told her husband about the affair, so he knew about it and was okay with it, and that Chris wasn't the only man she was seeing. She told Frizzo that Jason had suffered from depression for a long time, that he had back problems and couldn't do anything physical without being in a lot of pain. She gave them the name of the other man she was seeing, and he also worked at Oldenburg. His name was Eric Erickson. Well, boy, she didn't have to go far. All her love interests were at work.
Yeah, she was busy pooping where she eats. You should never have affairs with coworkers. It never turns out good. It's always drama.
Yeah, that's always a bad idea.
Yeah, it's never good. Either somebody loses their job or it's never good. It's never good. Don't ever poop where you eat.
And that is good advice. All right, so Kelly told them that all 3 men knew about each other. She talked about her sex life very openly with detectives. They asked if they should look at Jason, and she said, quote, "I don't see why you would." They said, "Well, husbands get jealous." She told police that he was very open with her about everything, even with him telling her he thought about killing her, but that he wasn't that type of person. After her interview, they called in Jason Cochran. He proceeded to tell them he saw a therapist for anxiety and he had been institutionalized. And when he gets, quote, wound up, he goes to see his therapist. All of a sudden, he starts bawling. What does he have to cry about? Why, at the beginning of an interview would he be so upset? Frizzo feels he knows more than what he is letting on. When questioned whether he knew about the affair, he stated he had, that he wasn't really happy about it, and that he wouldn't be okay with it, and that he didn't know what Chris even looked like, only knew his name, and knew that he was missing. He stated that there wasn't any way that either of them had anything to do with his disappearance. He talked about when they were in Indiana and he couldn't walk for 18 months. Quote, "He couldn't walk, and she stayed with him through it all." He claimed that when his body gave out, he was unable to work or to have sex. Their marriage went downhill, and he agreed that she could see other people. She was afraid that if he didn't let her do her own thing, that she would divorce him. He also knew about Eric. He said he either had to accept it or let it go. 2 days after Chris went missing on October 16th, Jason checked himself into a psychiatric hospital after waiting for Kelly for hours to return home and being suicidal. He was in there for 5 days or so, according to Jason. When asked if he had ever threatened Kelly, he said no. Taking her life? Dear God, no. "I wouldn't have done anything that would give up my freedom," he said. Chief Rizzo did not believe his story, nor did she believe in the, quote, weakness of Jason. She was concerned that he had done something to Chris, a crime of passion. Kelly cheated with other men, and he just snapped, is what she was thinking. She also felt that Kelly was helping to cover it up. November 2014, Frizzo had been searching for Chris for 3 weeks. She was worried with the upcoming winter months, as the Upper Peninsula always has a lot of snow during the winter months, that the snow and the bitter cold deterring their search. How would they ever find him and do an effective search until spring? They had a helicopter with infrared to see if they could see anything. She had dogs in from the state police in the area. She felt confident that if anyone would find him, it would be her, because she wasn't going to stop until she found the answers. Chief Frizzo was a dog with a bone. Frizzo found text messages between Jason and Kelly from the first week of October. Jason said, quote, "Don't be with other guys. Be with me." Kelly responded, "You never loved me. Don't ruin my life or hurt me anymore." Jason said, "I still love you. Please stop lying to me. And you went to lunch with another guy again. Come home after work, and no men for lunch, please." On November 10th, 2014, Frizzo decides to visit the Cochran home to speak with them again. When entering, Frizzo states how dark it was in the home, and Kelly said they were remodeling after just buying the place. She asked them to come down to the police department to follow up with some questions she had. She asked if one of them would come with her now, and the other in about a half an hour. Jason went with Frizzo first and told her about hearing voices in her head, mostly telling him that he would kill himself. As his wife was going out with other men very frequently, it upset him. He also told Frizzo that he likes to take walks on the Apple Blossom Trail. Kelly took their other vehicle, a truck, to work every day. But one day he was on a walk, but didn't go to the trail. He walked to Chris's house and saw her truck parked at his house. When asked how he knew it was Chris's apartment, he said he assumed it was his house because their truck was parked there. When asked why he walked that way instead of his usual path, he said, quote, "I don't really know. I don't have a good reason for walking that way." He was asked if he had ever met Chris. He stated he had not. After further questioning, he stated he almost felt that he should be talking to an attorney. When questioning Kelly, Chief Frizzo asked if Jason ever said anything about going to Chris's apartment, and Kelly said he had. Frizzo asked if he knew where Chris lived, and Kelly said she didn't think he even knew about Chris at the time, and Frizzo said Jason probably knew more than what she thought. Kelly said, quote, "Probably. He's a very smart man." Kelly refused to take a polygraph test when asked. Within days of starting the investigation, Frizzo received a call, quote, "This is Chris Regan." She was stunned. They had been looking for him, but the voice on the other end said, "This is Chris Regan Jr." She was hopeful for one moment, and then the next moment her heart sunk. The last time Chris had talked to his dad was about 2 weeks prior. They had been estranged and were working on mending their relationship. Chris Jr. was excited. They were about to get an apartment together. He knew something was wrong when he didn't hear from his dad. In January, he came to Iron River to move his father's things into storage. Frizzo asked to meet Chris Jr. and gave him his father's dog tags, which she had found in his apartment. He had spent 20 years in the Air Force as a master sergeant. Frizzo had taken the dog tags and hoped that having something of his would help her find him. When she gave them to Chris Jr., he refused them. Chris Jr. felt that Frizzo truly cared about finding his father. Frizzo interviewed Eric Erickson, and he said they weren't dating, that he had just moved back home as he had been in the military, 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 tour in Iraq. They met at work. He described her as fun and very outgoing and spontaneous. He said at first it was kind of fun, and he didn't know anybody when he came back home. After a couple of weeks of meeting her, he said they met up for drinks and to have sex. That was around September. They went out to an area he knew about at a lake, and it was across from the park and ride. The park and ride where Chris's car had been parked. The park and ride that Kelly had previously said she didn't know anything about.
Okay, so the park and ride is somewhere where she brings all her dudes. This is what I'm understanding?
Well, Eric and Kelly had met up for this sex date, so she initially didn't know about it. So Eric is saying, hey, I know a place by a lake. We're going to turn basically right, and the park and ride was on the left. So previously she didn't know about it, but now she does.
And that was right before he went missing?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there sets it up that that was a newly discovered area for her to ditch stuff at. Because if she didn't know it was there, maybe she thought a lot of other people didn't know it was there.
Yeah, and remember, she is also not from Iron River. They lived in Indiana. So there's that.
Yeah, those two are fishy. She definitely knows a lot more than we're finding out yet.
Absolutely. Erica told Frizzo that they would text each other and then all of a sudden she wouldn't contact him for days. That he had a feeling that she'd been talking to other men. He knew that she and Chris had seen each other previously. After talking, Eric shared the text between him and Kelly with Chief Frizzo. She read some of their texts and noticed one that was dated October 12th. She wanted to hook up, and it was at the same park and ride. She thought maybe this guy has some involvement. Maybe he was jealous and lost his temper. Maybe he was involved in Chris's disappearance. But Frizzo said Eric wasn't nervous. He just sat there and answered the questions. She asked if he would take a polygraph test, and he did. He passed. He also left Frizzo with a warning to watch Jason Cochran. He had also been told by Kelly of Jason's abuse, but warned Frizzo not to trust Kelly. He said that she would tell stories, and people would say that the stories hadn't added up, and people didn't think she told the truth about what really happened in Kelly's life. Over the next few months, in the beginning of 2015, Laura Frizzo was coming up against roadblocks by some of the men in authoritative positions about the pursuit of the case. One of the men was David Thayer. He was the city manager who had a past. Along with catching flack from Thayer, funds were low, and there was not much help. The community helped with some fundraisers, and a couple of private investigators joined the team. In March, she had enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for the Cochran house. They secured a .22 caliber pistol, which was under the entertainment center. They escorted the Cochrans out of the house, and with the freezing temperatures outside, they took refuge in a neighbor's home. The neighbor's grandson came into the grandmother's house and said that Jason's demeanor had changed. He was dead silent and beet red. He was scared, and that was not like him at all, to act the way he was acting. He said Kelly was talking nonstop and asking if they would find something. He said, quote, "They are searching your home, not because you didn't do anything. There's a reason they are there, and they will find it." They found a collection of swords and knives. There was a loaded .22 under the entertainment center, a baseball bat at the door, a shotgun and a hammer across from the door hanging on the wall. One PI stated, quote, "I know we live in the UP, but wow, this is too much." They had a positive reaction to luminol on the ceiling. The officers had found cast off on the ceiling of fine blood specks. Their living room could have been the scene of a violent crime. The blood spatter appeared to have been painted over. After 12 hours of processing the home, there was not enough evidence to make an arrest. Frizzo was absolutely pleased and hopeful that something would come back to help them solve the case and find Chris Regan. But the next morning, the Cochrans were gone. Frizzo then brings the neighbors that the Cochran had sheltered with in for questioning. They stated that they were both nervous and Jason had been known as an easygoing, jolly kind of guy, that this behavior was not normal. The Cochrans were supposed to return but never did. Frizzo wondered if the neighbors had seen or heard anything the night Chris disappeared, and it turned out that they did. No one had ever asked them until now. The grandmother had heard a gunshot and loud screaming and doors slamming and 2 vehicles leaving. Carolyn Myotek told them it seemed to come from the Cochran's house. She had seen a woman who she believed to be Kelly leaving in a car. In the days following, Chris Sayer, Caroline's grandson, and Todd Saylor, David's uncle, said that they had heard power tools late at night. They only heard them late at night in the wee hours in the morning. Saws, sanders, drills, reciprocating saws. If you are in construction or have any experience operating this kind of equipment, the sounds that each piece of equipment makes is unique. About the reciprocating saw, he said, quote, "You can cut through wood, nails, and everything at the same time. It never dawned on the neighbors that something sinister had happened in the Cochran home. 2 days after, like all the sounds and all that stuff that they were hearing, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Cochrans invited the sailors over for a barbecue. The Cochrans and the sailors had started hanging out in September of 2014, according to David, smoking weed and conversating. David stated that the Cochrans invited them over for dinner, but they'd never done that before. He said that there was about $150 to $200 worth of meat. They knew that this was a lot for Jason and Kelly as they struggled financially and wondered how they could afford to purchase so much meat. Jason had claimed to have been a butcher back in Indiana who had specialized in exotic meats. On a side note, Jason had never been a butcher. Jason had cleaned pools for a living while residing in Indiana. David said it was not any type of meat he had eaten before. It was transparent. He compared it to be like the transparency of lobster or shrimp with the same texture. Quote, the soft firmness of it. It was like something he had never had. When they found out Chris was missing, they wondered if the Cochrans were that type of people and, quote, had butchered him up and had them over for dinner.
So these people ate a bunch of foreign meats. Oh, some people are just too trusting. There ain't no way. There ain't no way I'm going to somebody's house and eating some crap that I've never seen before. And they just ate it up, and then weeks, months later, they have cops at their house asking them about all the strange noises that they heard. And then they're recounting how they went over there for our barbecue 2 days after the strange noises. And all of the meats were super strange. So if I were those people, I think I would imminently start throwing up everything I've ever eaten in my life.
Exactly. I mean, like, first bite. Nope.
No, but I'm sorry. The trauma that these people are enduring during the questioning, I'm feeling for them because I feel like I would be completely traumatized at having to retell this story with 2020 hindsight that they may have eaten human meat.
Yeah.
It's bananas.
Yeah, it ruined this. It ruined this particular guy, let me tell you.
Oh my God, that would ruin me. But then again, I don't think I would be that ruined because I know I wouldn't eat anything funny. So I'd be like, no thanks. No thanks.
Yeah, again, first bite. Weird. It looks weird. It tastes weird. I would just put that shit down. Nope.
Yeah, I can't imagine that I would have eaten a lot of it. But even just a nibble, or even just smelling it, and then knowing what it may have actually been months later after it happened, that is traumatic. That is totally traumatic. Oh my God, I feel so bad for these people.
I know. Ugh.
All right, go ahead. Now we're going to find out that it was human meat, right? That's what you're going to have next.
Okay, so David said when they realized that they may have eaten human meat, it changed him forever. He can't eat. He has lost a lot of weight. He said that he was friends with Jason and didn't understand how a friend could do that. He said, quote, it ruins you from trusting anybody. 2 weeks later, results came in from the lab from the search of the Cochran home. Hemoglobin was found. However, was it human? Was it animal? They didn't know. Still convinced, Chief Rizzo returns to the house once again to search a second time. She finds some writings of Jason's. It was a book of sorts. There were chapters. One was titled Where Monsters Hide. Each chapter had a different title. He talked about being a predator and how a predator has a tingle, a sense when hunting their prey. He talks about an unwanted guest. On one page it says, wife saves the day with a barbecue. The lab needed DNA samples from the Cochrans and of Chris Regan. As Chris was missing, his son agrees to give a sample. They don't have access to Jason and Kelly as they fled the state, but a PI calls to say he knew where they were. They had put a tracker on the Cochran's vehicle. The private detectives had carefully snuck onto the property of Jason and Kelly while they were inside and attached a tracking device under their vehicle. It appeared that they had fled south to their hometown of Maryville, Indiana. Kelly was born on June 5th, 1982, in Maryville, Indiana, to Melanie and Tim Kaboyan. Maryville is in east central Lake County in the metropolitan area of Chicago. Kelly first met Jason when they were children. They grew up right next door to each other. According to Kelly's mom, she had a troubled adolescence. Her teenage years, she started acting out, running away twice. She had her own mind, and once she made it up, she just did it. Kelly was into all kinds of drugs. They tried everything with their daughter as they had younger children in the home, and they didn't want Kelly to influence them. Kelly's mom tried tough love. She was put in a girl's home. Kelly was very intelligent, however, and even though she had a drug problem, she always excelled in school, even attending Purdue College, and received degrees in, get this, psychology and forensics. Kelly's mom never thought of Jason and Kelly ever being together, but they started dating when she was in high school, and Kelly described him as the boy next door. They fell in love and got married. They got married in the family church. Frizzle wondered if they had been running from Indiana coming up to the UP. She contacted the police department in Indiana. They had a DNA warrant, and she needed help to fulfill it. The GPS locator was no longer working, so Frizzo asked their neighbor, David Saylor, to help keep tabs on them. He was a little worried and scared, but Frizzo assured him that they would make sure he was okay. He wanted to help get these people off the streets as he didn't want anything to happen to anyone else. Kelly told him that they were at her parents' house. He went to Frizzo and told her of their location, and the local police department went to serve the search warrant. Jason was standing on the porch and had no choice but to give a sample of his DNA. Chief Frizzo made the journey to Indiana to be there personally. Frizzo walked in the room, and Jason had a big gulp. She has a plan to get him to turn on Kelly. She told him she thought he was a victim and needed to come forward and give her some information. Immediately, he wanted to lawyer up after she pressed the fact that she knew he had, in fact, talked to Chris Regan, and that he had told Kelly not to go back to his apartment. Now, it's Kelly's turn. She had frantically been trying to call Jason's phone while he was being interviewed by Frizzo. Frizzo tells Kelly she has the full conversation with her and Jason going back to the time when her and Chris started talking. She told Kelly she knew what happened, and it was time she talked. She brings up the park and ride and how Eric and Kelly had been there at least a couple of times, and the last time being October 12th. Remember, Kelly had denied ever being there or knowing about it. Frizzo caught her in a lie, called her out on it, and immediately Kelly asked for a lawyer. Right next to the Cochran residence was the Caspian Pit. It is a very deep mine and a great place to hide a body. So
we already know that neighbors ate it.
I know.
I don't understand. Did they not know the neighbors ate it yet?
Yeah, did they forget about that?
Yeah, why are they still looking for a body? They should be testing fecal samples now.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that's not really a thing, but I'm just funny.
Right. Okay, so I want to touch real quick on this Caspian Pit. So in the upper UP, there were a lot of mines which were abandoned, and these are wicked, wicked deep and full of water, like way deep. So Chief Frizzo's thinking, this would be a perfect place to hide a body or pieces of a body.
Interesting that now we find out that this chick, Kelly, actually has a degree in forensics. So although she never applied it, obviously, in the workforce, she has a lot of knowledge of anatomy and how things are connected and how best to disconnect them. It's like she's got a little bit of a head start on human puzzling. Do you know what I mean? So to dismantle the puzzle of the human body, she's aware of. And they had all these tools. So I don't understand why they're still looking for a body. I'm a little lost on that.
Yeah, yeah. And also, so not only did she have the degree in forensics and psychology, this chick is smart. She's kind of a step ahead.
She's smart and dumb all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so she lawyers up, and that's where we're at, right? She lawyers up, and then what?
Yep. So in the spring of 2015, Chief Rizzo requests a search of the Caspian pit for evidence. Jason was always curious of that pit. Over the years, there had been weapons thrown into the pit from previous crimes, and the success rate of finding anything was very low. However, they found a barrel attached to a cement block with clothesline. A few days after Chris had disappeared, the neighbor across the street had remembered seeing the Cochrans burning something in their barrel and a smell that was not right. Gary Warnholm asked them what they were burning, and their answer? Brush. He said, "I've lived up here my whole life, and I've never smelled anything like that before." Kelly said, "Well, it doesn't smell that bad, does it?" And he replied, "Well, we can get the cops down here and they could tell us if it smells." The whole neighborhood stunk. However, there is a fire pit near where the burn barrel once sat. They collected all of the ash from the fire pit, and what they found were components of a pair of jeans, a zipper, a button, and some grommets, as well as a blade from a reciprocating saw. But there is no evidence that these were from Chris Regan's jeans, or that the blade was used to dismember the Cochran's victim. Frizzo also gets the results back from the DNA samples, but the samples are too contaminated by paint and cleaning chemicals to come back conclusive. Frizzo is extremely frustrated at this point and knows this is going to be tough to be able to get enough evidence to arrest the Cochrans, as she believes this is not the first time that they had done something like this before. Frizzo reached out to the FBI. They were willing to help. They reverse engineered the GPS in Chris Regan's car and could now prove he was at the Cochran's house the night he disappeared. Then they find something disturbing under the front porch of the Cochran's house. A rabbit's foot. Frizzo sends a message to Terry O'Donnell, which is, the girl who was dating Chris, and then they broke up, right? So she's the one who reported him missing. So they asked her if she was aware if Chris did he ever have a rabbit's foot? She said, yeah. Chris did have a rabbit's foot, as he was a little superstitious, and he carried it with him everywhere he went. In February of 2016, 16 months after Chris's disappearance, a 911 call comes in from the Lake County Department in Indiana. It was from Kelly Cochran. Her voice sounds panicky, and she reports her husband is not breathing. The medics pull up, and Jason was non-responsive with no pulse. Jason Cochran is dead. Frizzo said she knew it was going to happen, but was still shocked when it did. It appeared to be a possible overdose. Since the incident happened in Indiana, the Hobart Police Department assigns a local homicide detective to rule out murder. They assigned Detective Jeremy Ogden to the case. He asked Frizzo if she would send everything she had, as he would have to combine everything together along with the disappearance of Chris Regan. Both of the investigators were linked together. Ogden stated that from the interrogations he could see Kelly was very smart and controlled as she sat in the interview room. He said he knew it was probably going to be more difficult than any other investigation he had done, and it was going to take something unique to get her to talk. The paramedics who showed up on the scene had noted something strange. Kelly was actually hindering them from saving Jason, getting in their way, carrying on. They ultimately had to ask her to leave the room. Now, if you are worried about your husband not breathing and you call for help, it is logical to assume that you would get out of their way so that they could help save his life.
Okay, so did she overdose him, and then she was just trying to wait for him to finally kick the bucket before? Why did she call 911 so soon then? That's my question, actually.
Yeah, my gut says he was already dead, or maybe just on the brink of death. Maybe it was to make it look like, she really was trying to help him. I think she
Yeah,
waited till the last minute.
I don't know. Okay. So she wanted him to die.
Yep.
All right. So what happened?
Okay, so Ogden went to the autopsy to let them know about the circumstances behind Jason's death, to make sure they looked at other things and not just the significant amount of heroin in Jason's body. There was bruising on his face and neck from being strangled. His sinus cavities were actually collapsed from the amount of pressure put on his face. The autopsy came back and it was ruled a homicide. The death certificate reads death by asphyxiation due to strangulation complicated by heroin intoxication. At that point, they all knew that Kelly had killed her husband. She was fearful that he would be manipulated into saying things that he shouldn't. Ogden had enough evidence now to arrest Kelly Cochran, but he is in no rush. He needs to find a way to get her to tell him what happened to Chris Regan. Chris was still missing, and they needed more information. And that takes trust. His number one goal was to bring Chris home, and he knew she had the answers. Ogden brings Kelly in for questioning, and in the interview, Ogden is obviously trying to make her feel safe and not a suspect. He even holds her hands while speaking with her, consoling her, but pressing questions toward her, trying to get her to open up to him, and at the same time, work on building the trust that was needed to get her to talk. He asked what happened that night, and she said Jason wasn't breathing, that she slapped him a few times, and he asked if it was hard enough to leave marks. She said, quote, I was scared, so it's possible. Next, he switches the subject to Chris Regan, saying that he believes she could help with finding him, not as a suspect, but as a witness. But Kelly's not talking. Detective Ogden needs a plan, and he knew that she was involved. The FBI gives something to Ogden by putting him in touch with Jason's best friend and gaming buddy, Walt Amerman. They asked Walt to become a confidential informant. The plan was that he had a letter that Jason had mailed to him, but there was no letter. Walt wrote it out like Jason would have done and signed it with, quote, quack, quack, because that's what Jason would say. It was his handle in the gaming community. Next, Walt made the phone call to Kelly. He was very nervous. He said to Kelly that he received a letter in the mail from Jason, and inside was a note and a sealed envelope inside. The note said, if something happens to me, please send this letter in 2 weeks. Don't open it. An envelope with no return address, but addressed to the Iron River Police Department. She said, please don't. She said those 2 words, and he knew that they had something to do with what had happened in the UP. Ogden knew they had her, and she was worried. 2 days later, she contacts Ogden and says that Jason sent a letter. She returns and said, quote, I'll tell you what happened to Chris Regan. He's dead. Jason shot and killed him. Finally, she breaks down and admits it. Jason shot Chris in the back of the head, and they dismembered him. Detective Ogden wants more. He wants her to lead him to Chris's body. That night, he persuades her to go with him to the UP to find Chris. They get into a vehicle at 1 a.m. They drove 6 hours north. She leads them to a nearby county road. He was amazed by the vastness of the area. He stated that anyone could disappear here and never be found. They started driving down the road and go back into an area where she claims that this is where they dumped his remains. While they investigate the woods, Kelly agrees to take Ogden back to their house, which was a few miles away, the scene of the crime. He asked her to walk him through the events of the night, to basically do a reenactment. When they are at the house, he notices knives everywhere. They were on the kitchen counter, and they had to be very careful. She was involved in the murder and was not handcuffed. So I found this very interesting because there's a docuseries where the majority of this content is pulled from. And here's what's crazy. They boarded up the Cochrans' home, but left everything the way it was. So it was crazy to me that all these weapons and knives and everything were just left on the counters the way they were. I just find that very interesting.
The other thing that's really crazy is that they don't have her handcuffed, and they have her walking through the crime scene. So forensic evidence, you're messing with it all now, because you have her back there, and if she touches anything, then she could say, well, that happened when I was there with the cops. I don't know. That just seems fishy to me. Like, why would you do that? Why would you let her back into the crime scene?
I don't know. Maybe it was just to gain her trust. I don't know. Because at this point, she's already copped to it. She's like, well, fuck it. I'm guilty. Let's do it. I'm all in to confess.
Yeah, but she's still bringing them to where the remains were when she knows that they dismembered him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's confusing. All right, go on.
It plays out shortly here. You'll see. Kelly said that she and Chris, like once he got there, right there in the entryway, they just went at it hot and heavy, having sex right there. She decided to take Chris upstairs. Chris starts to go up the stairs, and Kelly said she didn't know Jason was in the house, but that Chris was walking up 2 or 3 steps ahead of her when Jason came up the stairs from the basement and shot Chris in the back of the head just past her. She said that he had fallen backwards down into the basement. Kelly said Jason forced her to clean up and that he dismembered Chris's body. As for the search going on in the rural area in the woods, there is no trace of Chris Regan. They returned to Indiana, and it had been previously agreed upon that even if they didn't find anything, they would return to Indiana and continue the proceedings as long as Kelly agreed to talk to them about the case. They didn't have Chris Regan's body, and they were still looking for it. Ogden thought that Kelly didn't want to give them everything all at once and that they needed to work for it. Kelly knows it's inevitable that she is going to be charged. It's the weekend, and on Saturday, they were to meet up for a polygraph test. On the day she's supposed to meet Ogden, she never shows up. He received a text from her saying, quote, "The West Coast looks good this time of day." Well, Kelly had fled.
I don't understand why they still had her out free. Like, why wasn't she charged with Jason's murder? They said it was murder and by asphyxiation, and they just still let her loose? Like, I don't understand why she wasn't sitting in jail for the murder. Is it because they couldn't charge her with it yet? But she was there while he was dying. So why couldn't they charge her with that?
I think it was to continue to earn her trust because they still want to solve the whole thing with Chris Regan. So I think it's just, yep, you know what? We're not going to arrest you. We're going to take you back home. We're going to keep talking to you, which was a huge mistake. I mean, she's already a flight risk. Both her and Jason had fled.
And she's kind of a serial killer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get it. She's like she's a serial killer, and they just leave her to her own devices.
Yeah.
They're just like, okay, we'll get back at you.
Yeah, I know. It's nuts.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So now on the West Coast, apparently. And then she tells them that she's on the West Coast. What the hell?
Yeah.
This is, you know?
Yeah. So Chief Frizzo is convinced that now is the time to arrest her. Well, good luck. She's taken off, right? Show the prosecutor that the time is now. The prosecutor came through with the arrest warrant. Detective Ogden is able to obtain an emergency location on Kelly's phone. He knew she would be too curious not to look at her text messages he had sent to her, and they pinned her down in Kentucky. So she was throwing him off. U.S. Marshals hit the house and took her into custody without incident. While in Kentucky, she is taken back to the local county jail. Within 6.5 hours, Ogden and his partner arrived. Kelly is finally ready to admit not only was she in on the plan to kill Chris, but that she was supposed to have killed him herself. It was all a part of the gruesome blood pact made years ago, the night of Kelly and Jason's wedding. The pact between Jason and Kelly was that if either of them had cheated, the one who cheated had the responsibility to kill the person they cheated with. She claims that her feelings were too strong for Chris to kill him, though. Jason said he was going to kill Chris. She knew her husband was in the basement with a rifle. She sent Chris through to the back door after he came to her front door. So the back door, when he comes into that little foyer there's stairways immediately to the right, and that goes into the basement, and that's where her husband was lying in wait. Ultimately, she wanted him to come to the back door, as that was the plan. She was the one who led Chris to his death.
Okay, yeah, because Chris was about to leave, and she didn't want him to leave. So she was probably pissed that he was moving away from her. So he came over for one last fling before he left for his sons, and she murdered him. So it's absolutely her plan. She wanted him dead, and Jason is just the patsy, apparently, for her serial killing, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, yeah. And remember in his writings that Chief Rizzo had found, remember he made the comment that his wife saved the day with a barbecue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. But it was her, I feel like it was her plan.
Yep, I agree.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Happened.
So a few weeks later, Kelly was transported to Michigan from Kentucky. May 17th, 2016, in Iron County. Kelly had indicated that they used black garbage bags to dispose of his body parts and that they were left in the woods. And this didn't bother her at all. She was casually smoking a cigarette while the dogs were looking for Chris's remains. So she had let him out to where they were, right? So she's in handcuffs, smoking a cigarette. She asked for a Coke. She told the cops she was hungry and could they get her a cheese pizza. And again, very casually, they got the pizza and she was just eating it while they were searching for Chris's remains. She said everything was in the area. They continued to probe her for information as the search continued. Quote, "How long do you think it took you to cut up the body?" Kelly said, quote, "He was on for a while," while she smiled. "I got sick when I walked in and seen it." And then shakes her head and says, "I don't even care anymore." Frizzo asked, "It must have given you some kind of pleasure?" "Yeah, the high, the blood." Frizzo asked, "Seeing the blood?" "Seeing the blood. I'm not a vampire or anything like that. But seeing the blood, the gunshot close." So basically, she's getting a high from the blood.
Yeah, so basically, she's trying to recount the story as if, yeah, it was kind of gross. Oh, yeah, I'm not a vampire or anything. I'm not into that. But at the same time, she's trying to mask that she was actually enjoying it. She liked it.
Yeah.
She loved everything about it that was happening.
Yeah.
She's a through and through sicko.
Yep, she absolutely is.
Period. Sorry.
Yep. Well, then the dog started barking and they found a bag. It was shredded a little bit because animals had obviously gotten into it, but the bag was empty. Undeterred, they continued their search. There was something that looked like a rock in a clearing. "It was Chris's skull," Frizzo whispered. "I finally found you." Waiting for the technicians to show up, she prayed that Chris would have some peace now that she had found him. While filming the documentary Dead North, October 17th, 2018, the crew makes an unexpected discovery. While walking in the area where Chris's skull had been found, a camera looks down and found Chris's jawbone. Frizzo said finding his jawbone was more emotional than she expected. She said, quote, "Things like this just don't happen. It's not a coincidence." And she had gotten extremely emotional at this point. A year and a half earlier, when Kelly Cochran led Frizzo and the team to finding Chris Regan's skull, Kelly also led them to two more crucial pieces of evidence, one of which would lead to finding part of the murder weapon in the Caspian pit. It was the barrel to the rifle used to shoot Chris Regan in the back of the head on that fateful day. She led Frizzo directly to where she had thrown it. It was a short distance from the shore, as she said she thought she had figured that she would never tell anyone about it. Finding the gun for Frizzo was validation. She also took them back to their house in Iron River. She pointed at something that had been missed while the investigators conducted multiple searches. There, laying near the kitchen sink, were a pair of forceps. She had used the forceps to try to pull a bullet out of Chris Regan's skull, and sure enough, there they were, laying on the sink. As it turned out, that was the one item that came back with Chris Regan's blood on it. After over 2 years of searching, finding blood evidence to Frizzo was huge. Kelly pled not guilty to all charges. She remained in the Iron County Jail on a $5 million cash bond. Chief Frizzo and Detective Ogden finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, and after spending months together on the case, the two have grown close. Eventually, they started spending time together on their off time. Jeremy Ogden stated that it's one of those things that only happen once in a lifetime. Quote, when you know that you are supposed to be truly there for this person, and this person is supposed to be there for you. Frizzo said she has told him more than once, quote, that it wasn't meant for her to find Chris Regan until I found you first. After solving the case of Chris Regan's disappearance in December of 2016, Chief Frizzo receives a shock. David Thayer, the city manager, relieved Frizzo of her duties. He told reporters that they had two different styles of managerial techniques and irreconcilable differences. Frizzo claimed that the city manager had animosity towards women. She said at the time when she should be celebrating all the hard work that finally paid off and Kelly was finally in jail, they had a solid case to convict her and she was fired from her job. Mentally and emotionally, she said she could never describe what that did to her. The community was very supportive of Chief Frizzo and believed in her ability to do the impossible. Now, you might think that the story ends here, but it doesn't. Opening statements for the trial of Kelly Cochran began on Valentine's Day in 2017 in Crystal Falls, Michigan. Frizzo was asked by the prosecutor to sit at the counsel table even though she had been relieved of her duties of police chief. She wanted Frizzo next to her during the trial. Kelly knows how to manipulate people and had a grin on her face and said, quote, you don't think that I can turn at least one juror? Kelly's base defense was that she didn't have a choice, because if she didn't help Jason, he would have killed her. She claimed during the trial that Jason had shot her twice, the same day they shot Chris. The verdict is in. The jury was not convinced. Almost 3.5 years after his murder, Chris Regan's case comes to an end. Kelly Cochran, guilty on all counts, receives life in prison without the chance of parole in the death of Christopher Regan. Chris's son, Chris Jr., was at the proceedings and stated, quote, it was the best news. Everyone was so happy and crying, hugging. Frizzo said Kelly just sat there straight-faced. Chris Jr. said, quote, she definitely felt she could lie her way out of it and that she could lie her way out of anything. If it wasn't for Laura Frizzo, Kelly would have gotten away with it. Ogden said it was very emotional and nothing can bring their dad back, but she wouldn't be able to do this to anyone else. Terry O'Donnell said, quote, I want Christopher to be remembered as someone happy and loving and kind. I mean, he had so much to offer, and she took it all away. Even though justice was served in the case of Chris Regan, there was still the matter of the murder of Kelly's husband, Jason. But it gets stranger. When Kelly's own brother, Colton Gaboyan, comes forward with an even bigger claim, there were others. Kelly may have been a serial killer.
I told you.
Mm-hmm.
She was on a spree. And I think it's crazy that they let her go free for so long. But I get it. You know, they had to have all the evidence, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. But this bitch, this is a serial killer. So we're doing a podcast on a female serial killer. There's not that many of those. This chick is definitely one of them.
So the police brought Colton, which is Kelly's brother, in for questioning. And during the interview, Colton said that she had been talking to a guy on Facebook, and Kelly had confessed to Jason about seeing this guy. He said, quote, Jason said to her more than once in his presence, well, I'll kill him if you want. I mean, he's just straight out said, I'll kill him. He said after finding out that all of this had happened with Chris and then Kelly killing Jason, he wondered if there could be more. And the more is coming from Kelly, Colton said. Supposedly, there were 9 in total. Frizzo said, quote, it was apparent that it wasn't the first time that Kelly Cochran had been involved in something like this, and I firmly believe that there are other victims out there. Oh, but there's more. There was a phone call between Kelly and her mother while in jail, and don't forget that all of these calls are recorded and monitored. So next is going to be that conversation. So Melanie is her mother, and here's what her mom said. What's going on, Kelly? What in the hell is wrong? I mean, where did all this come from? Kelly said, you didn't see this coming? Her mother said, no, I seen this coming after it all happened, but I didn't know that you guys killed people before all this. It just makes me sick to my stomach. Do you have a conscience? Have you always felt this way? Kelly said, very flatly, I've always been like this, Mom. Her mother said, like, since when? What age would you say? Kelly said, as far back as I can remember. Melanie said she didn't know there were problems, other than she knew she had issues with drugs. Quote, when you were doing drugs, you were doing things that you shouldn't be doing, making bad choices. Her mother also said, I really wish at some point you would have said, Mom, I feel like I gotta kill people, or I kill people. I need help. Kelly said, there is no help. I've already tried. Detective Ogden said that throughout the case, Kelly would want him to diagnose her. She said she would ask him, what am I? Frizzo wonders what makes a person want to take another person's life. What makes a person have no conscience about taking another life? Kelly told Frizzo that she was born the way she is. She doesn't have feelings. She doesn't feel sadness. She doesn't feel remorse or sorrow. It's disturbing. Kelly said, quote, I have 14 butterfly tattoos that are symbolic to people I have lost. Frizzo believes that the butterfly tattoos on Kelly's body represents her victims. When walking around the residence of Kelly and Jason's, they wondered why it was filled with butterflies and what the significance was. They were, in fact, very significant. Detective Ogden said, let me ask you something, talking to Kelly. She said, yes. Ogden said, other bodies? Kelly said, yes. Detective Ogden said, where are the other bodies? Kelly replied, Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee. Ogden said, well, what happened in Minnesota? Kelly said, I had a friend in Minnesota. Okay, how did he die? I don't know. Oh, God, give me a break. Kelly said, can we do this another time? Ogden said, be nice. Kelly started laughing. You know that's not in my DNA. In April of 2018, Kelly Cochran pleaded guilty to the murder of her husband, Jason Cochran, and received an additional 65 years. Now you can watch the docuseries Dead North and bear witness to what took place in Iron River, Michigan, due to the immense amount of footage and body cam and recorded interviews. Now, it is free on Tubi. It is a 4-part docuseries, so you can see for yourself how Kelly looks when she's taking the police out to the woods, walking through the house, eating her pizza while she's pointing at the forceps. Like, yep, there it is. It's really kind of mind-blowing.
For her, she's like, all right, well, you guys finally caught me. Now, no sense of lying, but I'm not going to give it all to you. But at the same time, like she's almost mocking them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's been right there the whole time, dumbasses.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting that she must have done one hell of a cleanup job because they found nothing. Nothing.
Well, ironically enough, she went to college not for a career. She went to college for personal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
She utilized that. She utilized her degree for her personal pursuits, not professional. That is crazy. So she's been a special breed from the word go.
Yeah.
And the fact that more people don't know about, like, the fact that I don't know about her is kind of crazy. And, you know, me and my whole feminism things, you know, women, let's raw, all that crap. On the flip side, like, this is also part of that. For society at large to recognize women are as evil as men are too, and if we always try to paint them as the damsels in distress, we're never going to really get to the core of certain issues, this being one of them, that they were kind of overlooking her as just the cheating wife, and they immediately looked at her husband for being the aggressor. I mean, she's the one. She was the one that was orchestrating all of this.
Yeah.
She was the mind behind it. But because she was a female, they kind of overlooked her for a while for it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think women that are serial killers, women that commit murder, I think they're more maniacal, more planning. A man, I think, just does it.
Yeah, because, I mean, women in general, because of society, we have to learn all the rules very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So she learned all the rules, and she also learned how to use them against men.
Yeah. And another thing I want to kind of chat about real quick is on the docuseries, there's pictures of Kelly when she and Jason were married. And this woman was very, very overweight. Now, the reason I bring that up is because as a nurse in critical care, taking care of very obese women, they are extremely psychologically in control because that's all they can control. I mean, have you ever taken care of someone that's so grossly obese? That's what they do. They run your ass all over the place. Get this, get that, do this, do that, do that. So on top of her being really smart, right, she had the whole psychological advantage because, in my opinion and in my experience with taking care of very obese women, they're very mind controlling. Again, because that's what they have control over. Have you ever run into that?
Yes. Yeah, but it really kind of runs into line. It's just like when they say when you lose one of your senses, all of your other senses are enhanced. It's kind of, it's weaved with that. Is when you're morbidly obese, you do have to utilize your mind more when you're less physical.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that comes into play. And yes, the control. It's what she had control over. And because she lost control with her own fitness and eating habits and whatever it was, or maybe it was a medical condition that made her overweight, which is quite plausible. But again, yet she had no control over that. So finding control over other things was probably a big motivating factor for her.
Yeah. And if you watch the docuseries, Kelly was working out. Kelly had lost a ton of weight, but she was built like a man. She was pretty fit, but she had arms, she had guns. So, she got control of her weight for sure. And that's probably, it was probably a high for her because, hey, I'm losing weight, I'm attractive, my husband can't have sex with me. And maybe that's what was the impetus for her to start losing weight. Her husband won't have sex with her. She wants to have sex. So she had to, get herself in shape. And then it was probably like a high for her because it's like, well, maybe it was also a psychological thing. Well, no man ever looked at me like that before. Now I'm in control. I'm going to get you.
Well, with all serial killers, isn't that the core root of it, is being in control when they've felt out of control in all other aspects of their life.
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy bananas. You caught me off guard with this one. I didn't know we were going to do a female serial killer one. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool in a weird, twisted way. Yeah. Look what you're doing to me, Trace. Look what's happening.
I know. See? I got you now. I got you.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so weird to think of the whole women serial killer. I was just having a conversation with somebody about this, about women serial killers and how there's so few of them. And then I actually said in that conversation, which was a couple of weeks ago, I feel like, I said, I feel like there's a lot more women serial killers. We just overlook them because they're women.
Mm-hmm.
So being found.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if it wasn't for Chief Rizzo, this would have never been solved. She would have got away with it again. And there would have been more bodies.
Okay, but then there's a little feminist side of me that says there's probably a lot more women serial killers out there, but they're not being caught because women are smarter. I'm just saying.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. All right, everyone. Well, thank you. I know that was a long story, but I just really wanted to do it all in one whack and not break it into a two-parter. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. We look forward to having you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good week, everybody. This one was a good one. I liked it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
See you next time.
See you next time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.